Ahsoka Episode 4 is the best live-action Star Wars that we've ever had since Disney took over Lucasfilm. The acting, the action, the cinematography, the transition in between scenes, and the effects were out of this world. The creative and magical locations, the sound effects of the lightsabers and everything else, and the world between worlds was beautiful. It looked much better than it did in the animated shows. I just love how the characters used the environment during their fight scenes. We saw Baylan use the Force to throw a rock at Ahsoka, and we saw Ahsoka use a rock to support her against a lightsaber standoff against Baylan. Because of course Baylan is so much bigger than her, he's a tank. It makes so much sense for Ahsoka to use the stone to give her more power, to hold her own in this lightsaber standoff against Baylan. And speaking of lightsaber battles, the duels in this episode are amazing. They are the best lightsaber duels I've seen since the prequels, even though I must say they're not quite as good unless they brought back Nick Gillard, who came up with the fights for the prequels. So considering they don't have Nick Gillard for this show, these duels are really good. Baylan, Shin and Maruk, and even Lady Elsbeth, even though she wasn't in it that much, were so good in this episode. The villains are so cool, they look cool, they're badass, and they all have great motivations. You can kind of sympathize with Baylan, and in this episode you kind of realize that he's not as bad as he seems. You realize that he's just a broken character. He's not evil, but he just has to do these evil things to benefit the galaxy in the end. That's what he believes. He's not out to kill anyone for no reason, and actually they did show that in the first 5 minutes of episode 1 when he didn't want to kill the soldiers, but in this one he gives Sabine a chance to find Ezra. He's really not evil, he keeps her alive, he stops Shin from killing her, and he's just such a great character. He's badass, he's sympathetic, and he's understandable, because we know what went down during Order 66, and his disbelief in the Jedi and his loss of hope is understandable because we know how he got to this point without even having to see his backstory. So yeah, Baylan is a standout at the moment. I love Baylan, and I've seen that everyone else does too. RIP to Ray Stevenson. He's an amazing actor and such a believable badass that he might just be one. Sabine's character moments in this episode are great. She gets so much development just by making one move, and that is the fact that she unpredictably gave Baylan the map to Thrawn and Ezra. And that scene was so good because it gives development to her character, Ahsoka's character, Baylan's character, and even Shin's character, considering she tried to kill her, even though Baylan told her not to, which makes sense because she's just an assassin. She's just trained to kill. She's just mad at Sabine because she's had to fight her, even though she knows nothing about her. So it gives us even more of an insight into how Shin works and thinks. And I've already mentioned how this helps Baylan show us that he isn't pure evil and that he's very much conflicted. And then with Ahsoka, it shows that her skills as a master and a leader are not polished. Her mistakes with Sabine has led to Sabine not trusting her enough, to the point where she believes Baylan's words and his ability to keep a promise, even though he's a villain, way more than she believes Ahsoka will keep her promises. Also the fact that Baylan did keep his promise and did not kill her right after she handed over the map like I thought he would, and it's just great writing from Dave Filoni. And by now we should not be shocked because Dave Filoni is the apprentice of George Lucas. I'll say it again, he's the GOAT.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
But one thing I have started to heavily notice over these last 4 episodes is that Shin is pretty weak. Once again, Sabine is able to hold her own against this trained Jedi apprentice. A fight between Shin Hati and Sabine Wren should not go on this long. All Shin needs to do is use the Force against Sabine and it's over. And yes, in my head, I've just had to make myself believe that Shin doesn't want to use the Force against Sabine because she feels like she doesn't need to. She's trained and Force sensitive, Sabine is not. And so she wants to show that she doesn't need any advantage over Sabine in a duel. But really, these are her enemies and she needs to kill them off ASAP. So I don't see why she'd do that, but that's all I can tell myself, because Sabine should not be holding her own against Shin. And to be honest, we do see Lady Elsbeth mention this during the show. She basically tells Shin that she's not strong enough to hold off Ahsoka and Sabine, and Baylan basically hypes her up saying that she can, as he is more supportive. But Lady Elsbeth seems to be correct, because Shin can't even hold off Sabine, so she died instantly to Ahsoka, just like Maruk basically did. Speaking of Maruk, he wasn't Starkiller in the end, and I knew about this about 2 days ago in the leaks that my sources let me know about. But to be honest, the episode was so good that it's not that bad. I don't really care that it wasn't Starkiller because we had other hype moments in this episode that were just amazing. The whole episode was great. Maruk ended up being Night Sister magic, which makes sense, as Night Sisters can do this. I never thought that Maruk was actually Starkiller because there's another character coming up in this show that most people have not heard about, and I made a theory video about it. If you want to go and watch that, it looks like this. But yeah, the Starkiller hope is still not gone. Anyway, in conclusion, this episode had stakes, tension, and amazing character development, and the effects were out of this world. The world between worlds looked so beautiful. I was actually shocked. And speaking of the world between worlds, Anakin Skywalker shows up at the end and he doesn't even look like a Force ghost. And I think this is because Ahsoka has actually died and she's gonna come back alive somehow, most likely through the owl that keeps following her, that embodies the light side of the Force. And Ahsoka's gonna come back as a more refined, pure soul of the Ahsoka that once was. I feel like she's gonna be more powerful. I mean, she was literally revived through the sister of the Force, so I'm sure she has a lot of power saved up inside of her that she is yet to release. But the fact that we see Anakin in this episode looking amazing, and they even de-age him a little bit as they should have in Obi-Wan. If the episode didn't cut off right there, it would have got pretty emotional. I've seen many people get emotional online about this scene, and it's great to see. This is what they need to do. They need to give everyone a reason for why they need to watch the next episode, which is not only written by Dave Filoni like the rest of the show, this episode is directed by Dave Filoni. And so considering how crazy this episode was and how crazy the ending was, I can only imagine how insane the next episode is going to be. It's a must watch. I'm so excited. This episode was a 9 out of 10. In fact, who am I kidding? This is as close to a 10 as you can get, especially for Disney Star Wars. This episode is a 9.9 out of 10. Damn near perfect. So this is my opinion on it. How do you feel? Let me know down below, and I'll see you
next time on Dragon Ball Z.